We would love to start with the song, and we would love it if you could join with us in singing this great song that Ingrid taught us last week. So please stand with us, and we're going to sing. To start the morning. You may be seated. Welcome to Muskoka Community Church. We're so glad that you're here this morning. My name is Jeremy. I'm the pastor here, and if you're new, if this is your first time with us, I just want to reassure you that you are among friends, you're in a safe place, and we're very glad that you're here with us today. In a few minutes, we're going to sing some more songs. We're going to hear a sermon, do an interview, sing some more songs. But for now, I have everyone's favorite announcements. Now, just so you know, everything I say today is in our email newsletter, and we see that as kind of our prime way of letting you know what's going on. So if you miss a detail, I forget to say something, you have questions, go to that email newsletter. You can access it on our website. You can sign up for it on our website. You can also go online and fill out a little feedback form. Let us know who you are, how you heard about us, that sort of a thing if you're new here. What that does is help not only us to sell your information to telemarketers, but no, we don't do that. But what it does, in fact, we probably don't even do enough with that information. So if you've ever filled out the information and think like, what, are they going to come bring me cookies or something? Not at this point. I understand there are other churches that might do that sort of thing. Really what it is so I can begin to learn your names. Because let me tell you, was anybody who was here last week? Okay? Last week we had so many new people that I went home feeling exhausted just trying to remember people's names, and I remembered no one's name. And that's what happens to me because my brain doesn't work very well in that regard. So if you go on and fill a little feedback form, or even if you just send me an email and say, hey, remember me, we met on Sunday, this is my name, these are my kids' names, oh, that would be so helpful for me. I would really like that. Because I do like to know people's names, but I have been overwhelmed because we've had a lot of newcomers this fall, and we're grateful for that. We're glad for that. But it presents a challenge to my name learning function. So anyway, next weekend is the big weekend. It's our 10th anniversary celebration. We've got a lot of great things planned. We've had a team working on this for months and months. We've got 3 major events that you should be aware of. First of all, my ordination, which has been a long time in coming, will happen Saturday morning at 11 right here at the church, and we'll have a luncheon, a funeral luncheon to follow that. Well, you know, little triangle sandwiches and stuff. And plus, dying to yourself, living a new life with Christ. I'm sure that'll be part of the service, so, you know, it's okay. That evening, we're going to do a celebration dinner and dance at 5 o'clock at Dwight Community Center. Now, last Sunday was your last day to get tickets, but there are a few more available. If somebody, you know, if you're like, oh, you know, I just forgot to get them, or I didn't have the money or something, please just talk to April, my wife, or myself this morning. We will make sure that you get a ticket for that if you want to come. Now, after today, this is the real deadline, so you know, it does need to be today. That's going to be a great time to remember all that God has done and reflect back over the years. Finally, our Sunday service next week is going to be huge and exciting. We'll have lots of visiting dignitaries from out of town. Some of my family will be here for my ordination and stuff, and some of our denominational family will be here to celebrate with us as well. So make sure to be here. After the service, we're going to do a tree planting and plant a tree in memory of our 10 years. And also, there's going to be cupcakes if trees aren't your thing. Finally, for the kids, that we've been talking about a surprise fun thing that we've had planned for the kids, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to let you know what it was or not. So this morning I got permission to let you know that for the kids only, okay, adults, you have to be in the service here. But for the kids, there'll be a petting zoo here next week. Something, yeah, see, exactly, but you're going to be in here listening to me drone on and on. So anyway, we'll have a petting zoo. The kids are going to have a lot of fun with that. So be here next weekend. If you can't make it to the Saturday stuff, be here Sunday morning. We're going to have a lot of fun celebrating what God has done. Just a couple other things to sort of check your newsletter for. First, there's a country music fundraiser to support our Guatemala trip that we're partnering with St. Andrews on. That's October 27th, so that's in 2 weeks on the Saturday. Right here at MCC, it's a $15 donation at the door. It's coordinated by another team member, someone from St. Andrews. So I don't want anybody to associate me with having coordinated a country music concert. So I think we're clear on that, though. I've kind of made it clear in previous weeks how I feel about it. It's going to be really fun for people who like country music and gospel and things like that. There'll be refreshments available. Also check your newsletter. We're going to host the Life FM tour and show the I Can Only Imagine movie on November 9th. And there's also a number of volunteer needs that we have this fall you could check out in that newsletter as well. Finally, if you're bringing an offering today, there's a white box at the back there. You can put your donation in. There's instructions on other ways that you can give right there on the sign, or you can go onto our website and learn more about it. And every week in our newsletter, we publish kind of where we're at financially because we think it's something everybody should be aware of. And if you've been following along, we have been falling further and further and further behind. And I have good news on that, and that is that that's not a real number because we weren't able to hire an associate pastor in April, and we had budgeted for that. And so leadership team is in the process of coming up with a real number now that we know that we have an associate pastor starting in November. Now that we know a few other things, we're going to come up with a real number so that you can so that that's not quite as scary Because I've had other people talk about like, oh, wow, we're like $25,000 behind. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we're not actually that far behind. We're actually doing okay right now. And so we're going to need to bump up our givings a little bit as we go into the new year, just simply because we'll have that additional staff member. But right now, God has provided for all our needs. And thank you for those of you who give so generously to the mission of this church. Now, I would love to invite you to stand up with us and sing a couple more songs. And we have a new band member to welcome this morning, Emily Angel. Welcome, Emily. So without further ado, I think you may know this one if you've been here for a while.
Wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. For I spoke a word, you were singing no.
we thank you for your love. Thank you that no matter where we have been, no matter what we've done, that your love chases after us. And it's always there waiting when we come home. We thank you that your love is the most basic reality of our lives, and that everything else we can build on top of that. And I pray that as we spend this time together here in your presence, that you would speak to each one of us in a way that's personal, in a way that makes a difference in our lives, that we can bring back home with us, that can transform us. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. You are thinking, and that is, Jeremy wears glasses? Not if I can help it. But if you get up real close, you'll notice I have I think it's called a chalazion or something like that, a annoying but harmless bump on my eyelid. So I get to wear my glasses for a while. I don't like that. I always feel weird in my glasses. But Mark, before the service, said it adds credibility. So thank you, Mark. If anybody wants to start calling me Dr. McClung, even before I'm done my program, that's all right. I've got the glasses to go along with it. Anyway, so this morning we are launching out on a 7-week journey, looking at how God transforms our lives. So last week, our soon-to-be associate pastor, Peter Kabunski, talked about how the best thing that we can do to express our thanks to God for all that he has done for us and the love he shows to us is to offer ourselves back to him and ask him to transform us. And so we wrote out prayers last week in the 7 areas that we're going to cover during this series, which are spiritual, physical, mental, relational, vocational, financial, and emotional. We're going to cover all those areas of life and how God wants to transform us. And so we wrote prayers out, and I put them up on the wall, and my son asked me, is that supposed to be something? And I also had the same feeling after I was done putting them up on the wall. But what can I say? That is supposed to be the butterfly from the little series logo. But those are all our prayers from last week, whether you look at it as a Bible or as a butterfly or just sort of a weird fried egg. Those are our prayers. And they're going to stay there for this series as a reminder that all of the transformation in our lives springs first out of prayer. That prayer doesn't happen because we try really hard. Transformation doesn't happen because we try really hard and do it ourselves. 99% of the heavy lifting when it comes to transforming our lives is done by God. And yet, he still waits for us to be willing, for us to do the 1% little part that doesn't really do anything at all. His job is to transform us, and our job is to offer ourselves to him. And so the prayers will stay up there for the remainder of the series to remind us that it all begins and ends really in prayer. That this is not a self-help program, it's a God-help program, but that we have a small part to play in cooperating with what God wants to do in our lives. Before we get started on this week's topic, which is the spiritual side of things, I want to talk a little bit about how this series will work, because this is what we call like a church-wide campaign or church-wide study. And so here's how this is going to work. Each Sunday morning, I'm going to cover a specific aspect of life. The sermons will be my own. I'm not copying someone else's sermons, even if I could do that, which I could. I'm not going to do that. I have too much of a need for originality. So the sermons will be my own, but they're going to tie in with the materials that were created by Rick Warren. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's a pastor in Southern California who was author of The Purpose-Driven Life, which was a huge national bestseller. And that's where kind of his fame launched out. Though, I have to say, when I was in school, I studied his book, The Purpose-Driven Church, which was really interesting too. And then I guess he could only think of one way to title books, and so he did The Purpose-Driven Life and The Purpose-Driven Cafe and The Purpose, whatever. Anyway, but now he's put together this series called Transformed, and what it has is a little workbook that goes along with it, and I'll show you inside the workbook right quickly here. So the workbook has, now you're going to be surprised at this because you didn't know this was even possible, but weekend sermon notes. That's right, you could take notes of what I say. I know, it's a crazy idea, but you know, I paid extra money to get them to put that in here so that you guys would think of that. So you can come and bring your book in and take notes in there, and then it has daily devotionals. Day 1, transformed in my spiritual health. That starts tomorrow. So we start going through a daily devotional to help reflect on kind of the same topic I've talked about on Sunday, but in different ways. And then, if we go to the yellow bookmark here, what we have is small group notes. So it starts out in small groups, we'll watch a little video of Rick Warren talking. You get to fill in the blanks. Isn't that fun? I don't do the fill in the blank thing because it takes more work. That's why. But he has more time and staff, and so he's done a nice fill-in-the-blank thing that you can go through in your small group, and then there's discussion questions for your small group, discovery questions, he calls them, and you'll discuss those in a small group and help get further along in what it means to transform this spiritual aspect or whatever aspect we're working on at the time. Now, I think this is a great workbook. I think these materials are really good, and I voted for them. That does not mean that I agree with everything in the materials. So as I watched and previewed the videos and read parts of the book, I had lots of moments where I thought to myself, well, that's not how I would say that. Or even flat out, I disagree. Do you know what? That's okay. Because nobody said we had to follow Rick Warren. You don't have to do everything that Rick Warren tells you to do. You don't have to agree with everything he says on the videos. You don't have to do everything I tell you to or agree with everything I say on Sunday morning. This is not about conformity. It's about a conversation. And so if you hit a week in this study where you're like, oh, I just don't like what he's saying, first of all, I would suggest, search your heart. Why don't you like what he's saying? Is it because you really disagree or because you don't want him to be right? Sometimes that's the case. But if you really disagree, what I want you to think is, oh yeah, Jeremy said this would happen. What can I do about the fact that I disagree? It just sparks more conversation and more thought about how we deal with that particular aspect of life. So it's not about conformity, it's about conversation. So let's say that all together. It's not about conformity, it's about conversation. So when you get to those inevitable points, go back to that and go, right, okay. Now, if you didn't get a fancy workbook yet, that's because they're being distributed through small group leaders. So if you want a fancy workbook, sign up for a small group, you get a fancy workbook. If you just can't sign up for a small group and you want a fancy workbook, you can go on Amazon, and I checked this out. You can check it out today. I checked on Friday. There is one copy on Amazon selling for $146.73. So you can still get a copy. One person here can still get a copy even if you don't join a small group. No. If you can't join a small group for some reason, you still want a copy, talk to Al. We may have extras. We may be able to order some more. He may have some printouts that he might be able to give you. As far as cost, first of all, we want everyone to have one who's participating in the study, so it's not a matter of cost. If for some reason you're like, I'd like to cover the cost of the book, it's $20. It's about $20. Just put it in the offering box. But we see this as an investment in your discipleship. This is the year of discipleship for us, the year of transformation, and our prayers as a leadership team are that this study will just propel us all forward, both as individuals and as a church, to take another step in our spiritual growth, in our growth as disciples of Jesus. So, now, I don't know if you've ever analyzed the flow of my sermons, but they tend to kind of start with, maybe the situation, and then they go to a passage of Scripture that I think speaks to our lives, and then we talk about that sort of theoretically, and then we move on to the practical application. That's kind of how most of my sermons and most sermons in general flow. They start Bible theory, move to practical application. This morning, though, I want to change things up a little bit. I want to start with the nitty-gritty, the practical application. And then I want to explore the theoretical. And here's the reason why. I think probably most people here, if they've been in church for more than like 3 weeks, could probably get up here and tell us what we could do to improve the spiritual aspect of life. Right? This is not rocket science. Just shout it out here. What could we do, practically speaking, to improve the spiritual aspect of our life? What is it? Pray. Yes. What else? Meditate. What else? Love. What else? That's not, well, that's kind of practical application. But practically speaking, how do we develop our spiritual lives? Would anybody say read the Bible? Would someone say that, please? So, practically speaking, we know the stuff to do. Actually speaking, a lot of us don't do it. And so, I don't really feel like I need to describe to you in specific details all the things you need to do to transform your spiritual life. There's going to be some stuff in here that gives you some very specific actions you can take. If you need specific actions to take, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But today I want to offer you two things. Instead of a list of things you can do to improve your spiritual life, I want to talk, first of all, with a real person who lives out some stuff to do with their spiritual life so that we can learn from it being implemented in a real life example, because I think that's really important for us. Stories, concrete pictures help us grow. Second of all, I want to talk about why we invest in our spiritual lives as Christians, because it's different, I think, than what we sometimes have in our heads, and it's different than why many other people in our society invest in what they would call spirituality. And so once we get that why straightened out, I think we have a lot easier time dealing with the what. So, but first, in interview, I would like to invite John Henderson up at this point to come, and we are going to talk about how he sort of lives out this spiritual dimension of life. And I've asked him particularly because, here, you got to be on this side with the microphone.
Really?
Yep. They won't hear it on the stream. Hi, stream people. So, yeah. So thank you, John, for being here. One of the reasons I've asked John is because, John, are you a pastor?
No.
Yeah. Are
No.
you a seminary professor?
No.
Monk?
No.
None?
No.
No, John is an everyday guy living out what I thought was a pretty cool example of spirituality. So that's, John, thank you for stepping up here and using the mic too. So, now, a few questions. First of all, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do for a living.
I'm married. I live in Katrine. It's my wife, Alba. We own our own training and consulting company that we started 24 years ago when we moved up here. My background really is in corporate leasing, where I spent 15 years, and then we went into training and consulting. We made a decision together 24 years ago to try it for 1 year. It involves a lot of travel, and I couldn't do it without a great wife and mother at home with our children. And after 1 year, we sat down and talked about it and said, keep going, let's go. So there's pluses and minuses, but we travel a lot. And some of you may know that professionally, my travel took us to Bangkok, Thailand, a couple of weeks ago. So we spent 2 weeks in Bangkok, 5 days professionally, 6 days personally.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was nice.
I wonder if there's such thing as like a traveling pastor.
Could be.
So give us just a brief overview kind of your spiritual journey so far.
I was born and raised in Brantford, Ontario, and my grandparents, both on the Henderson and Lasky side, were Salvation Armyists. So my earliest memories were Grandma and Grandpa Lasky taking my brother and I to Sunday school at the Army, and then we'd attend the services at the Army. And I don't know, but like a lot of folks, children, once we got older, sort of went away from the church, if you will. Met Alba, and Alba was a Roman Catholic. Her last name, maiden name was Amarato, so she's Italian, if that doesn't give it away. And so she was a Catholic, and then when I fell in love with Alba, I was sort of in the day had to fall in love with the Roman Catholic Church as well. I can remember signing things that said my children were going to be raised Catholic, but I didn't convert to Catholicism. And so our children took us on a journey. When we had children, we have 3 children, took us on a journey to the Catholic Church in Berks Falls. But through that, we sort of tried different churches along the way as well. Mom and Dad attended Baptist Church and United Churches. And then our daughter Mandy, our daughter Mandy led us here to MCC when our first granddaughter was born, Marlena. And so we've been here for 3 years now.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, let's get into this whole idea of the spiritual aspect of life. What do you do to cultivate that spiritual aspect?
Well, I guess one of the things about the Roman Catholic Church was I had a little bit of trouble with the structure thing. I'm a little bit of a hippie and revoltist at heart, if you will. And so, here was the Catholic Church saying that you come on to us and speak to this guy in this little booth and talk to God. And that wasn't me. So I always felt that I could talk to God wherever I was, and that's how we raised our children. And so a number of years ago, I had a coach who started me on a path of getting physically well, which was I committed to walk 5 days a week, 45 minutes a day, 4.4 kilometers. And I began walking every morning, and then what do you do when you walk, Well, I started to talk to God, and I started to talk to other people about my walking and what they did. And so I developed a routine 5 days a week of walking and talking to God. And so I have a period of that time that is my what I call thankfuls and gratefuls, where I thank God for all he's done in our lives. And I have a period where I've picked up from people. One of a close friend of mine told me about this Hawaiian prayer that you can say, and it's I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And so I go through a routine of that, and there's certain things that I'll do repetitiously that I'll ask for forgiveness on, or I'm sorry for, and then there's other things that I'll say that just happened the day before that I want to pray about. And the other element of it is every time I walk, I always have a period of time where I'll ask God, the person I want to be, who I want to be, and how I want to be today is. And it'll change from day to day. Some days it's relaxed. Some days it's when I'm up in front of a group training and consulting, engaged and enthusiastic, etc. But that's my time with God, where not only I talk to God, but God talks to me. And it's really, really fun when God talks to you on a walk, and it can be just a star falling when I'm walking at 5:30 in the morning. I know it's God talking to me based on what I've talked about there.
And you do this all in your head, right?
No way. No, I heard somewhere that you should put it out there. So when I walk, I talk. And that works really well when you're in Katrine and there's only 3 vehicles that go by you. But when I'm training in Los Angeles, California, and I'm talking away, people tend to give me a bit of a wide berth. That's their problem, not mine. Yeah.
I told him all he has to do is put headphones in, and then it'll look like he's talking on the phone. And then he said, yeah, but what if they hear what I'm saying? They'll be like, how did you get that phone number? Right? So how does this practice of walking and talking with God, how does that affect your day-to-day life?
I guess one of the things that I would compare it to, that's a really good question, and Jeremy helped me because he sent me these questions earlier on. In the 25 years that I've traveled, you could count on one hand the number of times I did not phone home, E.T., phone home, and talk to my wife or children. That was important to me. Those conversations were important. So the conversation I have with God is also important. And it's like it's become a bit of an addiction for me. Our family's gone through some difficult times in the last 2 years. And so I woke up not only wanting to walk, but wanting to have that conversation with God. So it's become it's become a routine for me. It's just become a part of my day where I get to talk to God and he gets to talk to me. And if I don't do it, I do 5 days a week. It's rare. In 5 years, it's been rare since I haven't done it. If I miss a day for whatever reason, if I'm in Edmonton training and it's minus 40 wind chill out and there's 2 feet of snow, I'll pick it up on Saturday because it's important for me to have that conversation.
That's great. Thank you for sharing with us. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Or
No.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for bearing your soul. Thanks, John. The reason I ask all those questions about being a pastor and stuff like that is because sometimes I think we fall into the trap of thinking that spirituality, Christian spirituality, is something for the super Christians or the pastors or whatever. And I can tell you it's just as hard for me as it is for any of you. And I think what John sort of puts on display there is that it might be hard and it might take some discipline, but it's possible. And it's a good thing to find something that we can do on a daily basis that allows us to develop that spiritual part of our lives. And you don't need to copy John. You don't need to copy anyone else. You need to find out what works for you to develop your own spiritual life. So now, that's the what. Okay, that's one example of what, and you probably in your mind right now could say, okay, and here's a couple other things I should start doing. But I want to move from the what, comma now, to the why. Why, as Christians, do we do spiritual practices? Why do we make the effort to spend time with God and to say, I want to develop spiritually? Is it somehow to please God, to make God happy? This was kind of how I was raised. I remember in youth group once being told that when I missed my quiet time in the morning, it was like standing God up for a date. And so there was some like guilt there, right? Like, God is pretty hurt by this. But what I've come to understand about God is that his grace covers everything and that he loves us no matter what. And so no matter how spiritual I am, I can't make God love me anymore. It doesn't make him more happy than he already is with me because of Christ. And so I don't think that the reason that we approach our spirituality is to make God happy or to somehow please him. So if it's not for his sake, well, then maybe we do it for our own sake. Maybe we do it because it charges us up. It fuels us up. I've heard people talk about spirituality that way before, that they just got to go get recharge their batteries with God, which I think it does kind of work that way, except when it doesn't, okay? I think if we're honest, spending time with God does not always recharge our batteries. And if we're even more honest, sometimes we don't want our batteries to be recharged in the way that we know God would recharge them. And so I think sometimes when it comes to spending time with God, if the only thing motivating us is so that we can feel good or be charged up, I don't think that that's a lasting motivation. And so maybe we just have to do it as a discipline, like exercise, like going to the gym. Maybe you don't enjoy going to the gym the way that I don't enjoy going to the gym, but we do it anyway because we know it's good for us. It somehow makes us healthy. And so we approach our spiritual life as just another area of health that we pursue. Again, I think there are some aspects that are true about that, but if I look at the going to the gym habits of people in general, perhaps just a sense that we ought to do it because it's good for us is not enough to get us to actually do it. So maybe that's not the right or lasting or final motivation either. And so today I actually want to give you another motivation, just slightly tweaking these things a bit, that comes from a famous passage in the Bible known as the parable of the prodigal son that we're going to read in just a moment. But as I read it, I want you to help me. I'm going to ask some questions in a bit. And so I want you to try to put yourself into the position of the prodigal as I read, okay? And I want you to maybe close your eyes, and I want you to engage your imagination. I want you to feel the sensations that he feels, both the physical sensations, the wind on your face, the mud on your feet, the rocks as you walk down the road. I want you to feel those physical sensations. I want you to feel the emotions that he might be feeling in this story. I want you to see what he's seeing. Okay? Because I'm going to ask some questions about it afterwards. And so I'll need some creative thoughts on this. Let's just put ourselves in this story as I read it. Luke 15, starting in verse 11. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." So the story talks about 2 very different experiences this younger brother has. You can either open your eyes or wake up now, by the way. One of these experiences we will call away from the Father. The other experience we'll call home with the Father. Let's talk about what the Son felt in both situations. What did the Son feel when he was away from the Father? What were the emotions he was dealing with? Shame. What else did I hear? Hunger. What? Lonely. Homesick. Humble. Fear. Freedom, yeah. Wasn't all bad, was it?
No.
What else? Regret.
Probably fun, but only at first.
Fun at first. What else? Guilt. Anxiety. What else? Consequence. Abandoned. Abandoned by all those friends. Vulnerable. about hopeless? He wanted to eat the pods, but nobody gave him anything. What's that? All right, let's go over to this other one here, home with the Father. What did he feel, either at the beginning or more towards when he came home? What did he feel? Accepted? Oh, protected, yeah. Protected. Loved. Entitled. Forgiven. Satisfied. Accepted. What's that? Mercy. Oh, that says mergy. Mercy. That works better. What else? Welcomed. I'm going to put embraced with that. Surprised. No doubt. Grateful. Peace. Yeah, at first, I would guess there's still, like, along with the surprise is a bit of like, Secure. Joyful. Sorry. Yeah. And even though there was like an illusion of freedom over on this side, which ended up like leading him into basically slavery, over here he came as a slave and then finds himself free, I think. So what looked like it was going to offer the freedom wasn't what ended up offering the freedom. Provided for, yeah. Awakened. Good. Good job. So what was the point Jesus was trying to make when he told this story? I think maybe the most basic point is that we all have two choices of how we're going to live our lives. Whether we live our lives away from the Father, and can you relate to any of those things when you're living away from the Father? Or whether we stay home with the Father. And can you relate to those things when you're connected to God? No matter how far we've wandered, no matter what we've done, no matter how badly you might have rejected God, no matter how selfish you've been, no matter what you've done, the message of this parable is that whenever you turn back to God, he comes running to meet you, wraps you in a big hug, and embarrasses you by kissing you all over. And then he puts you in a place of honor. He gives you his signet ring, which was like a credit card in that day. And he restores you back into the family as if you had never left. And yes? Sure. Oh, interesting. Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. There's an element of protection there in his running as well, to get to us before someone else can. But if you're someone who has been wandering from God, who's been, off on your own, for a long time, and somehow you're randomly at church this morning. Somehow you're randomly watching the service. This message of this parable is that it doesn't mean you don't have to polish yourself up. You don't have to fix yourself. You don't have to get everything better again before you turn back to God. All you have to do is turn back to him, and he's going to come running to meet you. Now, I used to think about this parable in that way, as if like it was something that would happen maybe once or twice over the course of our lives. That this was like about the big times when we really have done really bad stuff and we've forgotten about God for years and years, and we come back to him and he's ready to welcome us. But as I've reflected on this passage over the years, one of the things I've realized more and more is that this turning back to God is not something that just happens a couple times. It's something that happens again and again and again. In fact, it forms the basis of what it means to practice Christian spirituality. Christian spirituality is about turning back to God when we've been away from God. And it's about staying with God when we're with God. This passage is this vivid illustration of not what happens once or twice in our lifetime, but what happens on a daily basis. Each of us has a choice on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, of whether we live at home with our Father and live out of all these things, the fact that we're protected and loved and forgiven and accepted, the joy he gives us, the freedom he gives us, whether we live out of this reality that we know is true, or whether we go off and do our own thing and experience some of the things on here. It's not just in the big decisions or in the big narrative of our lives. It's a daily, hourly decision about what reality we're going to live out of. Now, the truth is, and the ultimate reality is for us, is that we are forgiven, that nothing can separate us from God's love. But Christian spirituality is about staying connected to that truth, living out of the experience of living home with the Father in all of those things that we know are true, but we can easily forget. Maybe the old hymn said it best. Come Thou Fount has a line where it says, "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love." There's something about our hearts that just sort of automatically drifts away from God. There's something about our hearts that is prone to wander. And Christian spirituality and the practices that we do, prayer and Bible reading and meditation and going for walks and going to church and participating in small group, all those things that we do are our way of living out of this reality of being home with the Father instead of just letting our hearts wander off track and wander away from him. And I don't know how you experience this, but I find that when I skip my morning prayer time, my morning devotions, my heart goes into auto-wandery mode. Does anybody else have that experience? That there is something valuable about starting that day and saying, today I'm going to live out of the fact that you love me, that you've accepted me, that all my sins are forgiven, that you honor me, that you provide for me, that you protect me. I'm going to live today out of those realities, and I'm going to help other people see that too, that you love them and that you accept them, and therefore I'm going to just sort of overflow with gratitude and love and hope. But sometimes I go to bed this way, and by the time I wake up in the morning, I'm living here. Can anybody relate to that? That I wake up in the morning feeling maybe it was a dream I had, maybe I sleep in, and now I'm late, and I've got to rush around, and I skip my prayer time, and I get to work, and someone this is not so much me, because there's not a lot of people criticizing me at my work, since I'm the only person that's an employee. Maybe when Peter comes, maybe Peter will make sarcastic comments about me being late, and I think, well, you're not perfect either. And all of a sudden, I'm living out of this reality here. It happens pretty quick, doesn't it? I think you're laughing because, oh yeah, right, this is real. This is life. On a daily basis, there's so many things pulling us to live out of guilt and shame, homesickness, fear, regret, feeling all alone and disconnected. And the purpose of Christian spiritual practices, those things that you know that you need to do, is to help you to stay connected. And this is one of the ways that Christianity is unique among all the different spiritual practices out there. And I'm not saying it's the only one, but there's a lot of things that people call spirituality that really are just kind of self-help. Christians refer to spirituality as the practices that help us stay connected in a relationship with God. Christian spirituality is uniquely relational. It's not about achievement. It's not about doing a bunch of stuff to impress God. It's not about just getting our exercise because it's healthy for us. It's about being in relationship and staying connected, living our lives out of this reality of being home with the Father. Now, this story, oh, by the way, just a little something for you to think about. How many of you are really good at always staying home with the Father? So no one. Okay, good. Me neither. Me neither. I'm not good at just staying here. Sometimes I feel guilty about that. Like, oh, if I was a better Christian, I should just stay at home. But you know what? Jesus told this parable because I think he recognizes that all of us struggle on a daily basis with unsunning and undaughtering ourselves and going our own way. And what Jesus is saying is, yeah, that's going to happen. It's too bad. It's not ideal. What you need to learn is not so much how to stop wandering from God, because that's probably not going to happen, or it's going to happen over the course of a lifetime. What you need to learn is how to turn back to him every time you do wander, so that your wandering becomes, instead of months and years, becomes weeks. And then instead of weeks, it becomes days. And then instead of days, it becomes hours. And then instead of hours, it becomes moments, where you train yourself that every time you wander out of this reality, oh, wait, it's time to turn back home. Because we do this funny thing with guilt and shame. When we realize we've wandered away from God, we think, oh, no, I'm so ashamed. You know, I've done it again. I've done my own thing. And then we grovel for a week or a month or however long it is. And we just sort of feel miserable. Poor me. I'm such a sinner. You know, I did it again. God doesn't need any of that. He doesn't need you to go home and make a speech of, I'm only worthy to be your slave. Just get your butt home. Get it home as quick as possible. That's what he wants. And that's the rhythm we need to learn first, how to keep turning ourselves back. How not to wander? Well, maybe that's a lesson that another pastor can teach you who's better at that. But I've been learning over the years how to turn myself back home every time I realize that I've wandered, without delay, without pretending to make a big show of how terrible I am and how sorry I am, just turning back and getting myself back to God. And you know what I find? Is he's always there, ready to welcome me. He doesn't need the speech. He probably wants me to say sorry, and I do that. But he doesn't need me to grovel on the ground and only worthy to be your slave. He just needs us to say, I'm home. I'm back. Sorry about that. And that's the rhythm of Christian spirituality. Now, there is another son in this story, and I want to read about him because it's actually the parable of the two sons, not the parable of the prodigal son. And so, again, I want you to use your imagination and feel what the older brother feels as Jesus describes how he comes back. So, verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. How does the older brother feel as he's coming in out of the fields. What's he feeling? Jealous. What else? Hurt, unappreciated, unfair, left out, resentful. Here's a question. What reality was the older brother living out of? He was living out of the away from the Father reality. Even though it looked like he stayed home, he was not connected to the love of the Father, to the providence of the Father. And the Father pleads with him, everything I have is yours. Don't tell me that I didn't give you a goat. I gave you everything. You're the one who made yourself into a slave, out in the fields working away, never connecting with me. Now, this is a sober warning to those of us who are more churchy or more religious, that it's possible to look like we're home with the Father, but everything that's going on inside is actually disconnected away from the Father. And that's what Jesus is telling this story, that's who Jesus is telling this story to mainly, is to these religious leaders who thought they were good with God because they did all the right things. But Jesus puts them into the story as the brother who doesn't even get it. The brother who stays home and slaves away for the Father, thinking that that's what the Father wants when the Father actually just wants a relationship. And so for those of us who are more spiritual, it may be even especially important, more spiritual. For those of us who are more churchy, say that, it may be especially important for us to understand that the purpose of everything we do, sort of on a religious basis, is about developing that relationship with the Father, staying in his loving embrace, staying connected to the fact that he unconditionally accepts us, staying close to him every moment of the day. It's not about our achievement that we can be more spiritual than other people around us. It's not about knowing more of the Bible. It's not about having spent more time in prayer. You can do all those religious things and still in your heart be living out of this reality here. And so the older brother's a warning for us that it's always only about the Father's love. And it's not about our achievement and how good we are. So why do spiritual practices? It's to stay connected. Why does it work for John to walk every morning? Because it's his way of reconnecting to this reality. It's his way of living out that relationship. I want to close with a couple of songs now that just sort of reflect on this idea, that allow us a chance to pray about this. Again, any transformation in our life is going to start with prayer. And so I've chosen these two songs. The first is just a prayer, expressing our desire to be close to God. And the second is a declaration of a lot of the truths that we've just talked about, that every time we come back, there's a warm embrace awaiting us. And so as we sing these songs, I just want to make space for you guys to have a time of prayer and to say, God, help me get better at this. God, I know the things I need to do to stay home with you, but I'm not doing very well at them. So would you help me? And right now, in just this moment, I'm going to come home to you. So I want to invite the band up now, and we're going to just lead in these songs. We'll turn the lights down and just let there be a chance for you to spend time praying about this. And I'll begin with a prayer now. God, I confess that even as I was writing this sermon, I struggled to stay home with you. That there's something very wandery about my heart. There's something that wants to do its own thing, that wants to do what seems like freedom at the time, but that always ends up looking more like a pigsty. I confess that sometimes I know I'm away and I don't turn back home. And I pray that you would help me get better. Help me get better at staying at home with you, and help me get better at turning back to you as soon as I realize I'm starting to wander. I thank you for the ways you've been teaching me that. And for all of us here, God, may we be a church filled with people who live out of the reality of your unconditional, unimaginable love, your acceptance of us, your grace for us, the hope you give, the way you provide, and may all of that overflow from our lives and spill into the lives of those around us. In Jesus' name, amen. You can stand, you can sit, you can close your eyes, you can open your eyes. Just let this be a time for you to connect.
In the arms of the Father, there is love like no other. He who formed all things offers love to me. Where you go, we will follow. Through the dark, through the narrow, and in all we do, we are bound to you. I wanna be close to you. I wanna be close to you. There's nothing in this world that compares to all you are. We are found in your presence, seeking you in your fullness. Give us eyes to see. You are all we need. I wanna be close to you. I wanna be close to you. There's nothing in this world that compares to all you are.
My sole devotion, my only focus, to worship you. My life surrendered, my heart abandoned for more of you. My sole devotion, my only focus, to worship you. My life surrendered, my heart abandoned for more of you. I wanna be close to you. I wanna be close to you. There's nothing in this world that compares to all you are. I wanna be close to you. I wanna be close to you. There's nothing in this world that compares to all you are. I wanna be close to you. I wanna be close to you. There's nothing in this world that compares to all you are. There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome. There's grace enough. When I have wondered, Lord, your cross is the open door. There are no outsiders
outsiders. I'm not an outsider to your love. A refuge. You have no borders. When I was a stranger knocking on your door, you took me in
With no questions
and no conditions. When I was a sinner running from your grace, you called me friend. You called me friend. There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome. There's grace enough. When I have wandered, Lord, your cross is the open door. There are no outsiders. I'm not an outsider to your love.
of the harbor.
In every tempest,
When my soul was
shipwrecked, tossed upon the waves, you calmed the storm.
you are the Father.
There are no orphans. Every tribe and nation gathered in your arms sings with one voice. Sings with one voice.
Would you stand with us?
There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome. There's grace enough. When I have wandered, Lord, your cross is the open door. There are no outsiders. I'm not an outsider to your love.
I was tired, I was poor, I was thrown upon your shores. I was homeless and afraid, till I heard you call my name. I'm ransomed, I'm restored, resurrected, I am yours. I am loved, yes, I belong. Oh, my soul has found its home.
There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome. There's grace enough. When I have wandered, Lord, your cross is the open door. There are no outsiders. I'm not an outsider. There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome. There's grace enough. When I have wandered, Lord, your cross is the open door. There are no outsiders. I'm not an outsider. There are no outsiders. I'm not an outsider to your love. Even if you can't see me, go in the knowledge that that door is always open. And go in the experience of God's unconditional, unmeasurable love and grace. And may that experience spill out in hope and gratitude and faith and love to everyone around you. See you next week.